Welcome to Read Your Comics. Today I'm looking at Spawn number 9 by Todd McFarlane and Neil Gaiman. Today I'm joined by a special guest, Dave of West Coast Davengers. Dave actually requested this book. Hello, Dave.
How you doing, Daryl? Thanks for having me on to flip through one of my favorite comic books of all time.
Oh, thanks for hooking me up with it because I did not have this issue anymore when you sent me a line saying that this would be a good one to cover for the 1993 journey that I've been on.
Well, it is technically the most expensive comic book ever made, and definitely the most expensive comic book of 1993.
We can definitely dive into the legal battle around this book as we get into it. So this is part of my 1993 journey, though, which was a pivotal year for comics. It was the height of the speculator boom. Image was in its second year. Valiant was booming. You know, DC had like Nightfall going on and Reign of Superman. Marvel had just variant covers out the wazoo, or I should say gimmick covers out the wazoo happening. And everybody was snatching up like 15, 20 copies of every book, right?
Yep. I mean, I probably had 5 copies of Spawn number 1, and that
Definitely.
was late 92, I believe.
Yeah. So Image started in 92, and well, we're on number 9 here in June, or no, it says March of 93. So most of the books that I've looked at have been either number ones or like anniversary issues that I've kind of like kept it to. And I wasn't really planning to do any Spawns, mostly because, you know, Spawn was past number 1, and I just didn't have any. I only read Spawn up until about a little past 20, I think. It was the Grant Morrison issues
Yeah.
where Greg Capullo took over, and once McFarlane stopped drawing Spawn, I was done.
I think
Yeah.
so. I think I was done as well.
Yeah. So, but you know, I do remember this, and this was, you know, probably my first exposure to Neil Gaiman as well.
Me too. Me too.
So I had heard of Sandman, but I would say like Sandman was a little over my head, so I wasn't reading it or anything. But I knew who Neil Gaiman. I knew he was like an important writer at the time.
Yeah, he was a name that probably meant to me like, oh, the older people read his work.
Yes, definitely. So it's kind of cool to like get exposure to him on this, and probably the issue before being Alan Moore. I can't really think of an Alan Moore book that I read before that. But yeah, this is definitely a first for me for Neil Gaiman, and he's gone on to be one of my favorite writers of all time.
We share that in common. That is one of our very common factors, is that he is, for me, he's my favorite writer of all time, but Sandman is my favorite comic book series of all time. And you know, who would have thought that our first exposure to our favorite was in a book that Todd McFarlane was in charge of?
Yeah. So I think it was brilliant on McFarlane's part too, actually, to bring on these writers to kind of add like substance to his title, because he recognized that he wasn't the strongest writer.
Yeah.
And so he went out, and his gimmick, while everybody else was doing foil covers and variant covers and that kind of thing, his gimmick was, I'm going to get the best writers to come in and do a guest issue.
Yeah, the 4 in a row, and it's kind of funny because if he would have stayed on that route, Spawn would have turned out to be probably one of the most legendary books of all time for its writing.
Yeah. Can you imagine if Neil Gaiman or Alan Moore had done an extended run on Spawn?
Well, Moore did the most out of anybody because he wrote
The
the
Violator mini.
yeah, the Violator miniseries. Did he write the no, Ga and then Gaiman wrote the Angela
Uh-huh.
miniseries,
Yeah,
which is also great.
that.
You know, but I was hooked on this book, and also the cover. I mean, the cover really, as a 12, 13, however old I was then, I I knew what girls were, and I knew I liked this cover.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, 100% this one sucked you in. I mean, McFarlane already had the reputation of making Mary Jane sexy in Spider-Man,
Mhm.
and this was just an extension of that.
Yeah.
And I want to say, like, as we get into this, I want to say he was modeling Angela after Cindy Crawford, because she was like the it model at the
Mhm.
time. And you just look at her and like, I just see that kind of like features about her in the
S-
McFarlane style, you know?
Yeah, Crawford is tall and slender, and yeah, she was everywhere.
Yeah. All right, so we'll dive in. So we got story by Neil Gaiman, art by Todd McFarlane, letters by Tom Orzechowski, colors
Hmm.
Steve Oliff, Ruben Rude, and Ollie Optics. I always like how he did the dedications in the book. Of course, the
Yeah,
first one dedicated to Jack Kirby, and this one to Harvey Kurtzman, who I guess he must have just passed away at that time because it says in memory of.
I think he did pass away in the very early '90s. And it's pretty interesting because I would never have known who Harvey Kurtzman was
At that
up
time,
until maybe like 5, 10 years ago. I wasn't aware of who he really was.
yeah, I definitely didn't know at this time. I mean, and honestly, when Spawn #1 came out and it said Jack Kirby, I was not super familiar with even that at the time, you know?
Yeah.
So, but, like, looking back and, like, hindsight, it's so cool that he did do these, like, you know, these dedications, and they all did it. I think all the Image guys dedicated their first issues to
Hmm.
Jack Kirby at least.
Yeah, they did wear their heart on their sleeves when it came to the guys that they really looked up to and showing respect. And I think it was also part of the way that they felt Marvel treated them. They also knew that the big publishers treated these guys poorly. So it was their way of saying, well, we'll give these guys our respect.
Right. So, this book was the number 25 book according to Comic-Con on
Hmm.
the year, and I think if, you know, you've listened to the deposition stuff
Hmm.
on Cartoonist Kayfabe,
Yeah.
um, I think Neil Gaiman said it sold, like, 1.2 million copies of this book. Alone, you know, at least the numbers he was told. I mean, that's just incredible to think about any book selling that in this day and age.
Any book, and then you boil it down to independent book, and it becomes even crazier that number.
Yeah, and it's the number 25 book. Just think, number 25 was selling, you know, 1.1 million copies. Insane.
Wild,
So
absolutely wild.
let's jump into the first page here where we see Angela for the first time.
Hmm.
Um, we get some pretty dense text blocks. That is, I think McFarlane was pretty wordy even in his issues, but this
Yeah,
was a little different. That it was more in these like narration boxes where McFarlane does like a lot of like dialogue. I think, you
he
know,
sets the scene 4 different times in one page.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so I remember being a kid, and this was like kind of heavy, like a heavy read,
it
you know.
very much still is.
But definitely reading it this time, like I feel like I got more out of it, where it's really setting the lore of like, you know, what a spawn is, and you know, that they've been around, that there's been multiple ones over
Mhm.
obviously centuries. Of course, we don't
And
know that it's the medieval spawn until we turn the page and we
and
get that.
it's also a manual. I mean, that's the funny thing and the really neat thing about it. It's a manual how to kill them.
Right. And all like like the guide, like, you know, a young spawn is more susceptible to altruism and
Mhm,
you know,
mhm. It's really smart. I mean, it's just a testament to the wordsmith and the brilliance of Neil Gaiman, but, when you turn that page and you see medieval Spawn, the first thought to me as a the my first thought as a 43-year-old is, "Wow, I missed that toy." But then I remember, when turning the page and seeing this as a kid, I was just like, "Oh, this is something special."
Yeah, I think so too, because and we didn't even know anything about this. I think we'd seen maybe in the Moore issue, did they show a bunch of spawns like in hell, but we didn't see any in
Mhm.
like armor like this. They were all just like wearing the same kind of, you know, symbiotish type spawn suit that the main spawn we were reading about was wearing. So this
Yeah.
was like definitely something different added to it. And it makes you wonder when you get into the legal debate of it. What did Neil Gaiman just say? So let's do like a medieval type spawn, or did McFarlane like come up with this design? You know,
Yeah.
like that. That's where I think there's the gray area of like who really created what in this instance. But I don't think Gaiman was really even putting up a fight for medieval spawn.
No, he wasn't. He was more putting up the fight for the idea that he stopped getting paid for it.
Right. And I think
And
mostly of Angela more
yeah,
so
yeah.
than the medieval Spawn and
Which,
Cogliostro.
right. Medieval Spawn is such an interesting design, but people talk about how, oh, McFarlane, when he started doing Spawn, like his artistic, he stopped really going all in on his art. But I feel like he just refined what he was doing and made everything look just a little bit prettier and a little less chaotic.
Uh, yeah, I would agree. I don't know. I wouldn't. I feel like he's pretty solid throughout all of his run of Spawn here, which is what does he do? Like the first like 16 issues before
Something
somebody
like
takes
that.
over or something like that. I mean, I feel like most all of it was pretty good, and he had like delays and stuff, so
Hmm.
it's not like he was rushing it out or something. I think all of
Yeah.
it, like solid. So like you've got the medieval Spawn. Uh, he's addressing this woman out in the woods, and she says she is a maiden no more. Heavy implications there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, her dress is kind of ripped up.
Yeah, it's a lot ripped up. That probably kind of flew over my head. Obviously, thought she'd been like robbed or something, but the
Yeah.
no more, I'm sure, flew over my head as a kid. But her, she says she has a sister that's also been taken by. Does she say it's an ogre or just a bandit?
An ogre. She does
An
say an ogre.
Yeah. And so they're off to save it. And I like all this other page too, where he's like grabbing her up on the horse, and then like even the panel with like just the white silhouette.
Silhouette's really cool.
Yeah. All the way even to the last panel where like the horse is walking off in the distance.
You know, McFarlane, I think with Marvel, it wasn't as apparent. But when you look at his DC run of Infinity Inc. and you look at his panel layout, when he started doing Spawn, he started going back to like experimenting with panel layout and all
Mhm.
that. And the scroll with the text and the silhouette's just a really good kind of example of that.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes it's a nice touch for the for it being like you said, like a manual or a
Mhm.
pamphlet, and not
Yeah.
just a big box narration box. Well, there's so much text there too. If you just put that in like a rectangle, it definitely would have lost some eye appeal on the page. It would have.
Uh, yeah, and I imagine Gaiman's script probably had some details in there of ideas for layouts, but maybe not. I would love to see the script as it was handed in by Gaiman.
Yeah, and supposedly he just turned it in, and that was it.
Yeah,
That's what
that
he
was
said.
it.
Like, were there any revisions? He's like, no, he accepted the first script.
Well, smart idea.
Yeah, I mean it's a great issue. Revisiting it was like a lot of fun, really. So the next page, we've got another big scroll going down the side of the page that looks
Yeah.
fantastic in itself, almost like its own panel. And they see the cave underneath the waterfall, and he's like, "I'm gonna go in there," and tells her to stay there, but she's like, "Nope, I've got to go with you. It's my sister." And he's like, "Okay, whatever."
I did think it was interesting that maybe McFarlane gave up, but if you see on the first panel, you can tell her arm is crossed holding her dress up. And then the
Mhm.
panel with the waterfall, you can see she's doing the same. And then on the
Yeah,
next page, she's no longer holding her dress up. Maybe it's magic.
I did. I did notice that when I was reading it as well, and I was in my head. I just went, "I guess she tied it up somehow before she
Yeah.
climbed down the side of the cliff."
Yeah.
She wasn't worried about it till she had to climb, and then she did something to fix it up.
I still think it was
That's funny.
magic.
Yeah, I mean, well, we'll see. It's magic in a second for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
um, they go into the cave, and I like the panel too of just kind of the black where you just see like medieval Spawn's green eyes
Mhm.
and her kind of like the whites of her eyes behind it too. And she's like, "It's dark." That reminds me of his Batman work.
Yeah, yeah, it does. And, you know, he uses the little magic to light up the cave. The image of her when you finally, you know, you realize something's up at the bottom,
Hmm.
kinda I mean, it's so McFarlane-esque, but also kinda reminds me of Lady Death a little bit.
Yeah, with the pale skin right there.
Yeah, yeah. But these scrolls with the one on the opposite page being the longest one, but this one here, hunting methods. Only a hunter with plenty of time on her hands, a full arsenal, and a willingness to undergo potentially lengthy period of hardship and discomfort should even consider hunting a hellspawn. So that's giving us the indication that what she is, she's a formidable opponent.
Because before it's just talking about how the hell spawns kind of operate in the world before it gets into like the hunting stuff, right?
Yeah.
It didn't really mention hunting until this page. So that's
Hmm.
all a good build up to that. And that scroll's cool too, the way it like kind of twists around.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's good at what he does. He
yeah.
is the Todd father.
And then the next page we get the first big reveal of
What
her
a
in her
page.
costume. And I always like the ribbon wrapping around
Hmm.
her spear thing. I guess you'd call that a spear.
It's definitely something. But that's yeah, that's just Todd likes he likes things to have its own kind of life, these inanimate objects, cloth, I should say.
Hmm.
You look at his capes, you look at the
Yep.
webs, and
Yep.
now it's a ribbon.
Yep. Webs, chains. Uh,
Kids love chains.
yep. Chains and skulls.
Yep, yep, and look at all the tokens, the spawn logo tokens. I mean, I guess
Mhm.
she's killed all of those hell spawns. But yeah,
Yeah.
this is a very effective splash page.
Yeah. I mean, that sword she's got looks massive. Like the handle of it.
I know.
Her little hands would have a hard time holding that sword even with two hands.
Yeah, it actually seems like a sword out of maybe a Rob Liefeld imagination.
Yeah. And then we get the spawn power counter too, which I feel like up to this point, like it never made any sense,
Yeah.
you know. And as we go into this issue, we'll realize it's like Gaiman actually kind of finds a way to be like, okay, this isn't making sense, so let's figure out a way to like just kind of ditch it, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know how they, finally ditched it in the long run in Spawn,
Mhm. I don't
because
know.
they definitely did. I mean, you can have a power counter go down and still have a character 347 issues later,
Right.
or whatever number they're up to. The middle panel of these 3 on the bottom,
Hmm.
it's it it it's so Miller-esque.
I was gonna
It
say that too.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I love it because it reminds me of Miller right away.
Yep. And I wonder if that's a hint of like Miller coming up, or if it was just a choice he decided to make anyway. But yeah, the simplicity of like where the chains even have like the gaps
Mhm. Yeah, and the
between them, of
shattered
course.
rock.
Right.
It's interesting. I wonder it's also could have been a rush job, that specific panel, which, maybe that's McFarlane's way of dashing something out quick.
Mhm.
I don't know, but I like it.
I do too. I mean, if he was cutting corners, it worked.
Yeah, totally.
So she pretty much dispatches this young. I guess it was implied that this was a young Hellspawn,
Yeah.
and that's why she was able to kind of get the drop on him so easily.
Yeah, and trick him.
Yeah, of course, our Spawn is a young Spawn himself, so
Right,
that's,
right. And then,
setting up this whole encounter.
man, that Neil Gaiman's a clever lad.
Yep. So we wrap up on the next 2 pages. We wrap up kind of this little battle. Um, it does discuss her weaponry,
Mhm.
and it turns him into just like that green plasma. But then he boils down into just a little token.
Yeah, yeah. I guess, video games are everywhere, right, at this time, and it's a very video game-esque death.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You take him out, and he leaves you something behind that you collect.
Yeah, and then what I do love, and I think it's not gonna be lost on anybody, that last panel on the second page here, 800 years later, Angela is Mary Jane.
Yeah, not quite as red of hair, but yes. I mean, he just dipped into the model for that, didn't he?
He did. I mean, the only thing that would make this panel better is if there was a word balloon that said, "Hey, tiger."
Something about her and like her costume design on
Mhm.
her face that you don't really see too well in most panels, but that one kind of towards the bottom of the of that page next to the 800 years later is you see that the face design around the eyes is kind of like the opposite of a Spawn mask.
Yeah, yeah, it's right, it's where the white would be, but it's black, and
Mhm.
it the the facial expression on this, I mean, like, I never thought of Todd's facial expressions to be super I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is. They're not super varied, but here just a great facial expression that you don't see him do that much,
Mhm.
or at least maybe it's because of the design of the character, it looks different.
It's like some raw satisfaction too, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
like
She's a great character.
yeah, she really is. Um, then we click over to the next page, and that top panel comes into
Mhm,
play more in the next issue with the Dave Sims stuff. So I
mhm.
thought it was kind of interesting that shows up here in the issue before because I don't think Dave Sim had any input in this. So I wonder
Do
why they carried that over into the next issue.
do you know what that probably is? And I was thinking about it when I read it, last night. I bet you that is the roughs for the next issue. I bet you that is what was McFarlane was working with before issue 10 went into production.
Yeah, that's a good guess. Yeah.
Because that's exactly what it looks like. It looks like to me this is somebody's roughs.
Yep. It's definitely rough. And you don't really see McFarlane like experiment with his style too much
No,
to that
no.
degree.
But
Yeah, that's probably right. He may have just, saw that coming and kind of added it in there. And again, that's where you'd like to see the script to this book, you know.
yeah. Yeah, I would love to see I don't honestly would love to see the scripts for all 4 of the books that he hired the dream writers on, you
Mhm.
know? It would just be amazing to see because knowing these issues so well, I would love to see what they started as. But yeah, this is his dream sequence, which becomes a real visual treat in the next issue.
Yeah. Yeah, that Dave Sim issue is a strange one. It was strange to me as a kid because it seemed so out of place, but of course, it's set up pretty well though, really from this issue. But
Yeah.
um, Spawn wakes up from the in the alleyway like he tends to do, and the bums around him who seem to be all like celebrities that are the
Yeah.
dead missing celebrities that are in the tabloids all the time.
Mhm.
And
Not
and they're talking about how they're like the cops have been asking around for the costumed guy, and they've pretty much been covering for him because he looks out for him.
yeah, including, the one guy, who they talk about. It says, "Huh, you know what? I was reading the trade paperback of this. They changed the dialogue on it."
Oh, really?
Yeah,
On which
interesting.
part?
There's, like, towards the end of the Tricky Dick, that Dickie would scream, "Huh, I tell you if he ran again, I'd vote for him." I don't think that's in there. And Tricky Dick told him he'd seen you all right, and for a dollar it's one of my favorite things, he'd tell you where. So they gave him a dollar, and he says he sees you flying over the city every morning in a giant pink Cadillac with a big green gorilla. I just love that Neil Gaiman wrote that word
Yeah,
bubble.
I know. That seemed like a very McFarlane dialogue.
I know. So you gotta wonder if Gaiman really wrote that, or yeah, or if Neil or if, Todd wrote it. But I love this stoic, panel of Spawn in the bottom there.
Yeah, I was looking at that too, and it's got some simplicity to it too. It doesn't seem to be completely covered in, the typical McFarlane, uh,
Mhm.
little noodle marks and stuff.
Yeah, it's just all shading.
This whole page layout, even though there's not like much going on, but even the top panel, the way his cape is coming like up,
Mhm.
way up over all the other homeless people, and I guess that's the first Cogliostro
Yeah, that's him right there in
there in the
the
corner.
right.
But then the next page, we actually get him
There he
speaking.
is.
And I thought another thing in the depositions that was funny is that um, McFarlane wasn't really sure about this character, and he thought he was going to be like a Moses type character, so that's why he
Yeah.
was going like this. But Gaiman had pictured him more of like a like a fraud magician. But I
Hmm.
guess he is kind of wizardy looking, like Merlin without the hat.
Yeah, Gandalf, and pick your wizard, and
Yeah.
that's what he does look like. Or Santa.
So, and this is where we start to get how are we going to get around this power meter going down really fast, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this Cogliostro guy explains to him that he can like actually pull power from his costume and not have to take it out of himself. I mean, it's a workaround for sure.
It's
And
a
he uses
smart workaround.
yeah. I mean, and he uses it to pull up some like cherry wine or something.
Yeah. Nothing like a stereotypical Hollywood homeless person looking for the worst wine.
Yeah. You think you got this power to do whatever, get you know, why not pull some like aged like bourbon or something? Like,
Yeah, or maybe like $10 million in cash. I
yeah,
don't
there you
know.
go. There you
But Elvis is on the next page, so we
go.
know
Mhm.
we're not really living in the real world here.
Exactly. And I guess he explains that like all of these people have made a deal with the devil at some point, and that's why they're like living like homeless people. They got to do the thing they wanted to do, and that ended. And so this is kind of their punishment
Yeah, it's
is to
just to
live.
be in the alleys of New York City.
Yeah. And it doesn't dive into Cogliostro so much in this issue, other than like it says he knows who Al Simmons is and stuff. But I do like the idea later on that they explore that he was like an early spawn,
Yeah.
and he figured out real early on that like if he used up his powers and was sent back to be like a general of the army or whatever, and he was like, "Nah, I'm just gonna stop using my powers and just."
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting idea for the character and to kind of be like a mentor for Spawn going forward.
Yeah, and right, exactly, and that's the role he takes, and I always liked it when, um, Todd would draw that shocked look on
Mhm.
Spawn's face because it's always those big doe eyes.
Yeah,
Yeah, so he freaks out and says, "What did you just call me?"
yeah. And we're kind of left on the cliffhanger as we return back to Angela
Yeah, or Mary Jane, as I
or
like to
Mary
call her.
Jane or Cindy Crawford.
Yeah, or yeah, it's there you go, to all those people.
That's an interesting outfit she's wearing there with the is that like a jacket or a dress? Like
Yeah, it's New York, fashion, that's where fashion is born.
it's the 90s, but it looks a little more 80s to me.
Yes, yes, and, I'm not sure what building she's in. It's not exactly the Empire State Building, not exactly the Chrysler Building, it's something else.
Huh. That's probably some building that only the angels see, I guess.
There you go. It's the fabled town building of angels.
There you go. Yeah, yeah. But she goes to meet this other we're gonna assume is another angel,
Mhm,
Gabrielle, which I guess would be like Gabriel.
mhm, yep.
I like the panel at the bottom, um, that has her with the hunting permit, and it's just like a little ball of light.
Yeah, yeah, with
You
the,
gotta have a great facial
smoke.
expression.
Yeah, and he does his smoke ring or smoke stream around the beams of light.
Mhm.
It's some of what Todd does best.
Do you think that, I never thought about it as a kid, but, like, McFarlane does do, like, big eyes, like, almost like
Mhm.
Disney eyes in a way.
Yeah. I
Um,
think he was oh, sorry.
well, I was just saying, like, I never really thought about, like, his eye like, he has some cartooniness to his style,
Mhm.
but I guess I never really thought about the eyes being, like, overly big too much until recently when I've kind of been, like, looking at some of this stuff again.
I think almost in a low key way, he was heavily of heavily influenced by manga because he was reading a lot of Akira in
Oh,
like
yeah.
in the late 80s, and I think he was just low key influenced by it, but because it's an influence that you really have to know, which I don't read a ton of manga, but I think that's where some of that comes from.
Um, so essentially, this Gabrielle is saying like, okay, you go do your thing, but like keep it low key, don't cause a scene.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, cut back to Spawn talking to Cogliostro, and he's kind of giving the shakedown as to like why he knows who he is. And then I've got a pin up after that of
Yeah, the Jim Lee Angela pinup,
yeah, Jim
which
Lee by McFarlane.
which is interesting because this may be, and it, might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty knowledgeable about Todd. This might be the only time that he's ever inked Jim Lee, or at least the first time, because I don't think he did any inking on Lee in the Marvel years.
Yeah, he definitely didn't do it on any like X-Men or even covers.
No, no.
And then the only other option would be like the Punisher run, or there was unless it was just some random cover on something obscure. I can't imagine
Yeah, I
they would have
I have
collaborated on something too obscure.
yeah, but then come Image, they might have collaborated on some stuff that I just don't remember. But pre-Image, I think that is probably or that is probably the first time he ever inked Jim.
But it's a solid pinup. I wonder why they didn't color it though.
Probably deadlines.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
weren't really good at making them.
Yeah, especially at this age or at this stage and in the Image days. Okay, so then we're back to Spawn and Cogliostro, and he's starting to explain some stuff going on, but that's when Angela shows up, and
It's a great
he's just kind of like, okay, beautiful woman, I don't have time for you right now.
it's a great lower panel though. The one before it where she says, "Excuse me, can we talk?" And
Yeah,
there's just the tap on the back because I forgot the story flow when I was reading this again last night, and I was like, "Wait, who's tapping him on the back?" I'm like, "Oh, it's Angela."
yeah, and it moves pretty fast. Like I was saying at the beginning of the issue, it was so like dense with the
Mhm.
scrolls and stuff, and then once you kind of get past that, the rest of it flows like super fast.
Yeah, yeah, and the fight scene's fantastic, and when we
Mhm.
get it started here, and the shading and just the different light sources that he's trying to use here, I love it, and the way that the left page is almost like it's like a three-quarter page splash, but, she goes and bleeds onto that center, into the right
Mhm.
page, and it's just such an iconic, great pose. That's a pose that I don't think I'd ever seen McFarlane try before. It seems very not like him, and it works.
That boot she has on.
Well,
I
yeah.
feel like that boot was designed for her toy to be able to stand up correctly.
I think you're right about that because I don't think a human being could actually stand in that boot.
Yeah, or move in like a combat motion, I mean,
Well, her outfit wasn't really meant for hand-to-hand combat as much as it was meant to, lure in 13 and 12-year-old boys.
yes. Yes, 100%.
Yeah. But,
Mm,
hey, that's marketing for you.
yep. Which Todd was a master of that, if nothing else, if nothing else. He knew
He is.
he knew how to make things cool for the demographic that he was selling to, you know?
He he idolized Stanley, and I think it's very apparent, especially now when you hear him talk, he knows how to make you interested in whatever he's talking about.
Yep. And you're right, he does kinda do like a Stanley where he amps up his own personal excitement about things.
Yeah, yeah.
Although I think he genuinely is excited about a lot of the stuff he does where, you know, I love Stan Lee, but like really when I look back at it, he was doing a sales pitch and he
Yes,
didn't
he was
necessarily love it in the way that like McFarlane loves what he does.
yeah, yeah, and, and that's what makes me still love him today is that I just enjoy his existence in our world, and it stems from, these comics.
Hmm. And I respect McFarlane too, because he does have this toy empire and stuff, and he's made millions of dollars, and he could have stopped making comics and would probably be better off not making comics, quite honestly, at this point. But he still does it, you know, and he at least still inks, and I
Yeah.
guess he still does, like, some plotting, to
Yeah, he
some
does.
degree. So, you know, he's still involved in his property, like, and you gotta respect that he still loves the medium enough to keep doing it when he doesn't have to,
No,
you know?
yeah, he the one thing he doesn't need is more money, and he talks
Yeah,
about that, and I've heard him say it verbatim for the last 15 years, but, yeah, I respect him for the fact that he still puts stuff out for people that want it.
mhm,
Um, I gotta say these next 2 pages are absolutely bananas, but I love it.
yeah, yeah, I do too. We'll start with the one on the left first.
Yeah,
Um, when she zaps him and the suit just becomes, like, limp, empty clothes, right?
yeah,
And then it looks like his cape is turned into, like, just a pool of it doesn't really look like blood so much, but it's just liquid, like red
yeah,
liquid.
like plasm or
Yeah,
ectoplasm or something.
and she's kinda looking at it, like, confused almost, like, what just happened, like herself.
Mhm.
And then, these hands come out, and then and then this next page.
Yeah, the next page is gratuitous enough. I mean,
Yes.
we're all there for it, though.
Yeah,
We were all there for it.
yeah.
I do wanna
What?
point something out.
Okay.
The other page where she's looking confused, there's the
Uh-huh.
Felix cameo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, good eye.
But yeah,
Good eye.
that, that next page, well, look, her outfit wasn't conducive to being thrown upside down.
Definitely definitely was not.
But the
Yeah,
this
that panel definitely set off some, or activated some of those teenage hormones.
For sure, for sure. But then the panel after it is amazing. He's got his hands around her throat, but then there's the gritting of the teeth with the saliva leaves the next page open to, well, not so much interpretation, but some.
Okay, I wanna ask, since his clothes were, like, still up there on the top, is
Yeah,
this a burnt up, crusty, naked Spawn down here in the dark green plasma area?
I think so. But in saying that, he still has the spikes on his hand. But
Okay,
clearly the costume's not on him.
yeah. It's definitely not on the face. So I love when McFarlane would do that too, where, like, the face is in black and all you really ever get is the eyes and the mouth with the teeth, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, beyond just Venom, but, like, there's, like, Hulk issues that he does that, and, anytime he wanted, like, just kind of like a terrifying monster, he went to that well a lot, and I'm there for it every time he did it.
Yeah, he even did it with Spider-Man a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Like, in some of the adjectiveless issues, and, I think it's a two-part thing. I think he knows how effective it is, and I think it's a way for him to get a little more work done without having to do a lot of work.
Yeah, so the next part or the next page, she's kinda given over at that point.
Yeah, she is, and, it's just what proceeds to happen in future issues with them, they eventually have sex, and
Oh,
so,
yeah?
like yeah, and so,
Was that
uh
in so I guess Gaiman did he write number 26 or just contribute I think it's number 26 where she comes back. I know he wrote the
he
miniseries,
wrote the miniseries, so a lot happens in the
but
miniseries.
in that Depositions, they talk about issue I think they said 26, but I guess is when he contributed to or something because that kept getting brought up
Yeah,
too, so,
yeah. I read
but
it last year, but I don't remember.
yeah, see, I never read that far up, and, so I don't know what happened. I did read the Angela miniseries, though. I did read it when it originally came out. Yeah, so I didn't know what exactly happened with the character going too much past this. But yeah, so like she takes off like in like a ray of light. He crawls back out of his cape, and Cogliostro's all impressed with
Yeah.
what he did. Then he starts monkeying around with the staff left behind, and he's zapped away. And we see the power meter go down to 0.
Right. Or it just blanks out.
Right.
Doesn't I don't know. But what this is he goes up, and that's where the Angela miniseries, I think, starts. Think.
Like right after this.
I think that's where it takes place, yeah. Because he ends up in heaven, I believe, and like we're all, and that's a whole thing. I'm trying to
Oh,
remember, but
the next issue was because I thought this leads him into the Dave Sim issue
maybe
where he's
maybe it does.
Dream World or whatever. I mean, I
Yeah, I
don't.
can't.
It's been 30 years since I read it,
Yeah,
but I thought
yeah.
that's what happened because I mean, the next issue is the Dave Sim issue, but maybe they jump around. But yeah, then you have Cogliostro being like, oh well, he had potential, but at least I got this box full of cherry wines.
But he, ends up sticking around for a long time. I don't know when or where Cogliostro leaves the book, but yeah, he does become the mentor
Mm,
to Spawn issue after issue, trying to give him advice. And Al's a little too stubborn to take it sometimes.
yeah, and in this, it's like he's set up to be kind of comical. And if you
Yeah.
listen to like what Gaiman wanted him to be, like this, based him after this like fraud magician from like the, I don't know if it was like a fictional character or somebody that like it really existed. I couldn't remember, but it's almost like he was meant to be kind of comical. But I remember
Yeah.
on like the cartoon and the movie, they played him off as definitely more of like a hobo Gandalf or something of that nature, where he wasn't super comical. He was a little bit more noble, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you create a character and then you don't stay on that story, which obviously Gaiman doesn't, you have to think that maybe your creations may take a different path as what you intended them to be.
Yeah. So something, I don't know if you read any of the letters pages here.
I didn't.
Okay, well I did, and I'll just the very first, I didn't read all of them, but the very first one, I guess in a previous issue, Todd had said something about Marvel was going to lose all of their talent, or lose all their talent, or just wasn't going to be the same anymore because of what Image was doing and other creative owned opportunities coming out there. And this
Yeah.
person wrote in kind of taking offense to it, thinking he was like kind of bashing like the current artists that were still at Marvel at the time. And
Mm,
they listed off like the Q*berts and Greg Capullo, who was doing, I believe, X Factor at the time.
yeah.
And I thought that was kind of funny. And like Todd responds and is basically like, like, no, I'm not slamming like the people working there now. I'm thinking like as we go along, the opportunities beyond these corporations are going to be too good for the good talent to pass up, right?
Yeah.
Which makes some sense. Especially in this time when the number 25 book was selling 1.2 million copies. But I wonder if he read this and like Greg Capullo. Maybe I need to have a talk with Greg.
And also, don't forget Jay Lee.
Yeah, I
He
think
poached.
Jay Lee was mentioned in this little.
Yeah, yeah. So both of them are mentioned in the letter, and both of them get poached.
Yep.
And I don't know. He was on. I look at Image and their history and their early beginnings have a lot of rocky roads, but they were on the right side of history.
Oh, yeah, they were. They were. Although I also do blame their excess. Not really Todd so much anymore, but I do kind of blame like Liefeld and to some degree Jim Lee
Yeah,
for their lateness, their soliciting of books that never shipped,
and the
and
excess.
the excess of like come out with another number one, another number one, another number one, another number
Yeah,
one. I think that glut is what led to the crash that came not too long after this. I mean, they weren't complete. There were other factors like Ultraverse existed, like Dark Horse was doing tons of like just pumping
defiant.
stuff out. Yeah, Defiant, like trying to horn in on the Valiant there, and Valiant itself, like putting out chromium covers every month, like a zero issue constantly. I mean, all of that stuff contributed to it, but you know, Todd was pretty steady Eddie. He had his Spawn title. I guess he had a couple of spinoffs here and there, but he only really brought out a spinoff when I feel like maybe he really felt it was warranted.
or a new
Whereas,
character came about.
right. Whereas the other guys were like, I mean, like Brigade and Bloodsport from the Liefeld line. Was there any difference between those two books?
And then Youngblood and then Blood Wolf, and yeah, I mean it was a time of excess, but my original statement was kind of just more talking about like where Image is now and in
Hmm.
the has been for the last 15 years. If it wasn't for Image, we would be looking at a very different landscape of comics. Completely different and far worse because Image they came up,
Hmm.
they everything crashed, but then Walking Dead came out
Yep.
and it changed everything
Yep.
legitimately.
And the unsung hero of Image is Jim Valentino,
Yeah.
because his tenure, he really took when he became president of Image, he took it from being like a wannabe, just extreme version of Marvel and slash DC to like, let's put out like the best content we can put out, you
Yeah.
know, and like let's try to find like if somebody comes with a really good idea, even if they're not necessarily a super hot name, but like this looks like a good idea, let's just do it. Of course, the stories of Walking Dead are funny when Kirkman says like he had like the idea of it's like, well, he wanted to do a zombie book, and he was like, "There's nothing original about a zombie book." And he's like, "Okay, well, there's aliens in it." And he's like, "Oh, okay, well, yeah, all right, we'll give you like 6 issues and see where it goes." And they're like, "Where's the aliens?" He's like, "I was just kidding, man. There's no
Yeah.
aliens."
He tricked them. He tricked them
Yeah,
into I love that. Did you take a look, by the way? I didn't want to pass up the chance to just talk about the fan art.
yeah, I was gonna go to that next. Um, I didn't recognize any names. Do you recognize any names in it?
No, I don't. I
So
don't. I
nobody
just
really made it, I guess.
but there's some great stuff in here. I mean, the Savage Dragon one where he's holding the Billy Club, but the Spawn on the top right on the second page, I really like.
Yeah, those are both pretty solid. I like the spawn. I like number 10 there. That spawn.
Yeah,
Actually,
10's good.
both the spawns down at the bottom are pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Let's see, Chris
The
Chen
pit,
and Brian Coaster.
the pit is kind of a little
It's a little off.
off, yeah. But it's
Like,
neat that they included this. Like it's. I mean, this is a Stan Lee thing. Get the fans involved somehow.
yeah, yeah. They were doing all the things that they thought would work, or at least were the right things, even if they didn't all work. Speaking of Jay Lee and then Freak Force, those are both on the next pages.
Yep. Yeah. So Jay Lee had already been poached even before that letter came in.
Yeah. He was another guy, super talented, still is.
Yeah, and his style is so much more refined from this
Yeah,
area. Like what he does today, it's definitively him, but it's like there was just a rough edge to him in the '90s that
yeah.
he's shaved off. But
He was looking at Kevich probably almost exclusively during this time period.
yeah, yeah, I could. And I guess he had just finished up like doing Namor,
Yeah,
and then hopped over to this.
it's
Yeah, and
pretty
then he's
amazing.
Freak Force, which these are all pretty fun characters when they show up in Savage Dragon.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's the thing I love about Larson's character design. They're all kind of weird. They're
Hmm.
all they're all him. He wears his Kirby influences on his sleeve, but it's just his character design's always been a nice smorgasbord.
Yeah, yeah, and he comes up with some crazy ones for sure. Wrapping up the issue, we have the ad for Frank Miller. This issue coming up with number 11.
And almost as importantly, poster insert by Jeff Darrow.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
I don't.
killer poster.
I can't place that one in my head in my memory. And the Shaman's Tears ad on the back from Mike Grell. Well,
Wow.
Dave, you got any more thoughts on Spawn number 9?
For all of the Spawn books, it's just one of the ones that will always stick out in memory. And like I said, it's interesting when you look at the history of this book and the lawsuit and all that, but even further down, what it did, it brought Angela into the Marvel universe, and then it gave, Miracle Man's the rights back, and so it's a whole interesting history, but as a comic book standing on its own, it's still always gonna be one of my favorite books.
Yeah, it was a really solid issue revisiting it. Like I said, I hadn't looked at any of these really in 30 years, and coming back to it, I was like, wow, this is good. Like, I kind of think of those early spawns as like mostly just good for the McFarlane art.
Yeah.
Uh, but these guest issues, at least this one and the Moore issue, really stand out as just like that's just a good, solid one issue comic.
Yeah, a standalone that you could just pop in and pop out, and you wouldn't miss anything else because it's a standalone. And the other thing I just want to always say is see Todd, buy Todd.
There you go. I had it handy. Oh,
There
oh.
we go. I know what you did. Yeah, I know what you got.
um, let's see, what else was I gonna say? Oh, yeah. One other thing is, this character also inspired, like, a Green Lantern, knockoff character, if you
Really?
know about that. I don't remember the character's name, but it was during the Kyle Rayner Green Lantern era. I wanna say her name was, like, Fatale or something kinda generic, but she basically was, like, hunting Green Lanterns, and she looked so much like Angela, except she was, like, African American. Well, she was alien, but, they drew
Right.
her like African American, but, like, she had kind of a similar headgear. She wore, like, Green Lantern, like, icons of the ones that she, uh, destroyed. I mean, it was such a knockoff. And then, I never read any of, like, the Angela from when she was introduced into Marvel, but from what I could tell, it was, like, not really the same character. It was kind of a gimmick to just be like, Neil Gaiman got the rights back to this character, and
Yeah, yeah, and they brought
and,
her in,
and they
but
brought her in.
she's, I think, Thor's half sister or something in Marvel now.
That's what I read, but does Marvel still have use of her, or
I have no clue.
yeah, I don't know either. So, but yeah, all of that is really interesting in this character, and I guess that's all we got for it today. So, as
Well,
always, thanks for joining me, Dave.
yeah, and can I say it?
You can say it.
Read your comics. Can I say it?
You can say it.
Read more comics. Oh, wait, no, I meant
Your
hold on.
comment. You're
Yeah,
going
hold on.
kayfabe on me.
Oh, okay, babe. Hold on, hold on.